So the Stop Border Violence Initiative, it is the European Citizens Initiative, for those who doesn't know, is a tool, is a participatory democracy tool that is made available to European citizens to raise their concerns and claims at the EU level. The purpose of this initiative, but I mean, I will let Francesca tell better about this, but is to raise 1 million signatures to basically ask the European Commission to respect Article 4 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which prohibit torture to both researchers and activists that have been committed to solidarity with refugees and migrants. Also because, as we know, space for dissent has been is being a bit reduced in Europe as elsewhere. So I think it's very important to create spaces in which we can all discuss certain topics for as much critical and contentious they could be. Okay. I'm not gonna say much more, just that I think this is gonna be interesting to, especially thanks to the speakers, that we have to look at solidarity from different perspectives. Yeah? No, it's me. Ah, okay. That can give us some optimism and strength to keep working on these issues, but also, and in a way mostly, I think it's very nice the level of solidarity that especially the speakers that are here today are sharing, because they all have a lot of things to do and they are using their time, energies and competencies to participate in this. So not just solidarity towards people that are in a more vulnerable position than us, but also solidarity among ourselves to try to be together in this project. I'm gonna stop here and just wanna all people that, apart from being researchers, have been active also in a more operational and policy kind of fields. First of all, we have Federico Alagna. Is a postdoctoral researcher in political science and political sociology at the Faculty of Political and Social Sciences of Scuola Normale Superiore in Florence, an adjunct professor at University of Bologna in the Faculty of Political Science. And his main research interests have been EU and Italian migration politics and policies, with a particular focus on civil society actors and on the criminalization of people on the move. Then in order, if I'm not mistaken, we have Joanna Acevedo. Thank you as well. Joanna is assistant professor in European International Law at Nova Scotia. Policy of ISCTE, and a researcher at the Center for Research and Studies in Sociology, ISCTE, at CIES-Iscte. And she's director of the Master in Humanitarian Action and integrates the Erasmus project Humanitarian Action, Climate Change and Displacement, and Innovation in Humanitarian Response. And finally, Veronica Corcodel is assistant professor in European and International Law at Nova School of Law, where she also directs the Nova Refugee and Migration Clinic. And she's been assistant professor at Dublin City University and a Max Weber Fellow at the European University Institute. So as you see, it's a very interdisciplinary panel, and we are very excited to listen to you.
If there is some message because of our connection is not so very good, I'm very sorry. This is the best we can do. I just asked the audience also to turn off the microphone, and but okay, I think that everything works with the connection, and so okay, just reading the messages, but I think. It's fine. Can you close here? Can you close the? C'è the chat? Where is the chat?
Let's see.
Okay, so we can move for the
Poi tutto il tempo. Sì.
Qual é? É esta?
Tá? Nada minha.
Ah, já sei o que é. Desculpa. Tranquilo. É esta. E agora. Dai.
So thanks a lot for organizing this workshop and for having me. Thanks to Guya, Tiago, Francesca, and I think it's. I mean, I'm thankful for many reasons, but I think the most important aspect that I would like to thank you for is that I think it's very important as a person who is, who cares a lot about what goes on in the world of migration, and especially on what we can do as people to fight a framework, a policy framework that we believe it's deeply unjust. I think it's very important that we combine in a way the different forms of and expertise and also sensibilities somehow that we have as researchers, as activists, as people more broadly, like besides the labels we want and need to give ourselves. So I think it's important to have moments like this in which we can have these horizontal exchanges. In terms of what I'm going to share with you today, the aim of the workshop is in a way to reflect all together on how we can use this European citizenship, the European political space to fight. I mean, I use really the term fight because I think this is what it is. It is not just a matter of, a slight contestation of disagreement. It's really a fight against the European policy on migration. I would like to share some aspects among the many different that we can think about when it comes to the fight of organized or the field to which I would like to on which I would like to focus is that of the so-called strategic litigation, or more broadly, the politics of litigation of civil society initiatives. In a way, this is what? It's the idea of using the judicial arena, to use courts as a strategic venue, a strategic space to fight against EU migration policy and to promote this change from below that we, as again, people more broadly, besides labels, we would like to see. So when we think of, I'm just going to give you a very broad introduction to the field and to the understanding of what I mean by politics of litigation and why it is important. European migration policy, we essentially look at a framework which is at the same time restrictive in terms of the mobility of people. So it not only not facilitates, but it really impedes, it blocks the mobility of people, especially of vulnerable people, especially of people who have no money, people who are racialized, people who are in a way vulnerable or made vulnerable. So this is the restricting framework we are looking at. And it's a repressive framework, meaning that it's a framework that does not tolerate that somebody stands in solidarity with these people that are whose mobility is restricted. So this is the starting point of my understanding of EU migration policy. Within this this framework, we have seen over time that many different forms of contentious solidarity actions have taken, I mean, have developed, and academic activities. So there are some readings that you can also use to deepen a little bit the understanding of these fields. But in general, I mean, what is important to understand is that the reaction of civil society towards this framework has been a reaction that has taken very different forms. And I would say, I mean, from petitions to demonstrations to direct social actions at borders, both land borders, sea borders, etc., providing assistance of any type. So it has taken very, very different forms. One of within this framework, what has happened is that based on this restrictive approach, this repressive approach, and as a reaction to these forms of solidarity, the development of criminal law-based approach to immigration has managing, as the EU likes to say, migration through the use of criminal law. In this increasing immigration approach, what has happened is that the judicial arena, that is courts, have become a very, very important place. Why? Because a lot of people started being criminalized for what they were doing, either people on the move who were criminalized for crossing borders, or civil society initiatives that were criminalized for assisting in these migratory movements. So what happened? The judicial arena became central and progressively started evolving as a space that it was first used by the state, by, let's say, state actors to criminalize migration and solidarity, but progressively started to evolve. I mean, it became search and rescue initiatives, for example, in the Mediterranean Sea. So let's think of how many initiatives have been criminalized and had to defend themselves in courts of law, saying, okay, guys, what we were doing, it's legal. I mean, we have experiences here from CIES-Iscte that have also been extensively criminalized for that, for being accused of facilitating irregular migration, so to defend themselves in court. But progressively, what happened is that this approach to courts started to evolve. So many several organizations, several citizens, new citizens, if we want to think about the European citizenship, started realizing that this space, the judicial space, could also give them some opportunities. I mean, not only for criminalization, but could also become a space of political mobilization. So that's the starting point of my approach. In that form, like, strategic litigation become a clear opportunity for contentious politics in the field of migration. So it becomes this offensive approach to the judicial system. And it is something that I have had the opportunity of studying quite extensively, especially related to search and rescue in the Mediterranean Sea, which is one of the forms of solidarity and political action. I mean, we could talk a lot about how we want to define these kind of activities. So let's say I define them contentious politics in a very broad sense. But the sea rescue has been one of the political forms of contention that has fight against the EU policy regime. They've done so in very different types of courts, so from administrative courts, civil courts, criminal courts, at the national, EU, international level. So it has been a very wide approach, and I think that's also very relevant if we look at that from a European citizenship perspective, because we see how the European political space also gives this opportunity of resisting to this form of criminalization. So looking at all these situation of criminalization on the one hand and resistance and fight back criminalization on the other, the two questions that essentially came to my mind that I'd like to share with you today, I mean, both the questions and possibly some tentative answers to them, is and what are the characteristics that made this specific tactic, the specific strategy they used particularly successful. So I would spend a few words on both of these questions and the connected answers and see if this case of CIES organizations can tell us something about a strategic use of the European citizenship in fighting the EU policy regime. So the emergence of strategic litigation as a tactic in the field of sea rescue activism has essentially to do, in my opinion, my understanding based on the research I conducted in the Mediterranean Sea, to three main aspects that are important to understand also. That there was an increased difficulty, so to speak, and then I want to use a euphemism, in finding venues of political struggle that were actually feasible, open, and that could be used by civil society initiatives. In a way, there was a big question, so how can we change policy from below? I mean, we can save people at sea. We do that, it's important, of course, because we save lives, but if we want to change the very framework that makes people die at sea, how can we do that? I mean, what are the institutional channels or the non-institutional channels, the forms of protest or whatever that we can use to do that? And this was the first point, because in most cases, we were dealing with situations that were decided either at the national or even at the European Union level. So there was a big difficulty for many organizations to have a direct access to policymakers and say, okay, that the fact of being exposed to criminalization for many years in a very intense ways, many activists were facing very long sentences for what they had been doing, you know, like facilitation of regular migration in all the national laws of the European Union is a very serious offense based also on the European Union law. This makes, I mean, very important for people that are criminalized actually to have the opportunity and capacity of defend themselves in courts. They spend a lot of time doing that. They got in a very important, not only working, but also activist relationships with lawyers, with experts, with legal clinics that were actually working on this. They were forced to learn this because they had to defend themselves. So this created this form of socialization to courts. Now they knew what courts were. Third point is the social capital. So there was an increasing presence in many CIES organizations of people that had the capacity, the expertise, the direct personal experience of engaging in criminalization and in counter criminalization, or they knew about criminal trials. They knew in particular about, they were aware, so to speak, of the possibilities offered by courts. So these three elements, time structural, external, so related to the system as such, and also internal, so related to the organizations and to the civic initiatives for people that participated in them. This created these opportunities for strategic litigation. But once strategic litigation started as a tactic to fight the EU migration regime, the question is, I mean, why this tactic could actually continue to grow over time and to give some results. And this is based on 4 other aspects. So, I need to drink some water. Okay, there we go. So there were 4 other aspects that are important in this sense. The first one, I mean, I already briefly mentioned when explaining why strategic litigation came out in the first place, that the importance of creating connections with activist lawyers in particular was really, really crucial. It's an association in which there are many activists, lawyers of any time, judicial experts, law professors, etc., who actually contribute directly to the defense and on the one hand, and to the proposition of criminal actions or judicial action more broadly, on the other hand, on behalf of activists. So the category of activist lawyers became very, very important for these organizations that actually rely on this people. Second point is that compared to other strategies of political contention, a fight, strategic litigation allowed to get some, and in most cases, almost immediate results, meaning that this rescue ship in the Mediterranean Sea, you receive, I mean, the government, Italian government, or issue a decree saying, okay, you cannot enter the Italian territorial waters. You bring action immediately against this form of this decree. So you have a court ruling on what you said, and they would say, yes, you can enter the Italian territorial waters. It happened also with the disembarkation of people. Sometimes there were attempts by governments to say, you know, you cannot disembark people, you can only disembark vulnerable people after a search and rescue activity. Again, you have courts ruling on that and saying, no, you have to disembark everybody right now. So this kind of action actually allows over time. Strategic litigation allowed civil society initiatives to win cases. Actually, the vast majority of the cases that were brought against the EU and national migration policy regime were actually won by civil society initiatives. So this created a favorable case law, so good precedents for them. And this also encouraged over time acts of civil disobedience, because of course, if you have like government saying to you, you know, you can't do that, but you already know that in a very similar episode in the past, you challenged on the law, you know, the legitimacy, the legality of the government's action, and you actually won. This, of course, encourages acts of civil disobedience, because you know that the law is on your side, so you can do that, and you can actually disregard what the government is telling you. And encourages the protection of vulnerable people. So based on these 4 elements, essentially what happened is that this framework of the use of courts as a way of fighting against the EU migration policy regime actually became important. Of course, and moving to the end of the presentation, of course, it is not only a positive story. There are some challenges, some shortcomings, and it's also important to be aware of that, because we didn't have the perfect recipe. It's like, okay, we do that, and the EU migration policy regime is over. That's not the case, unfortunately, for several reasons. The first point is that this challenge is essentially legal. It's technical. Of course, you put also some politics in there, because you use that as an act of resistance, as a civil society initiative, but it's the world of migration in the society. You don't do that directly just by winning a case. So it can be good on a case-by-case basis, but it doesn't really change the dominant paradigm. And that's a challenge, because if you want not only to win cases, but if you want to do political action, if you want to do contentious politics, you also need to have in mind what is happening in the broader society. The second point is that it's essentially reactive and not proactive, meaning that you can use this kind of strategy when you already have some negative policies in place. So, I mean, you have like a governmental decree, you have some action performed by Frontex, for example, and then you and the lives of people had already been touched. So that's something we need to also bear in mind. So it always comes after a violation has already occurred. And the third point is that you are not always sure of the outcomes. So to say, yes, people tend to win cases, but you cannot be guaranteed of that. As an activist that I interviewed, a sea rescue activist, said to me, I mean, at the end of the day, the risk is that trials on us end up badly. So we are actually convicted for facilitation of irregular migration, and those on them come to nothing. Take, for example, at the trial that the former Italian Minister of Interior, Salvini, is facing in Sicily right now for kidnapping because he didn't allow some people to disembark a rescue ship. We don't know how this trial will end up, but I think that we really need to pay big attention to strategic litigation in the context of European citizenship and how we want to challenge the current migration policy. We need to understand that it's been a successful strategy, and it's important to understand what are the strengths of this strategy. But at the same time, if our goal is not only to win some cases, which again is already important as such, but if our goal is to change immigration policy, we also need to use other tactics besides that, also more traditional tactics, some direct protests or whatever, which are always good, I think. Also some, innovative tactics, and I think that what we are going to hear in the second session today is going to be very inspiring for us. But whatever tactic we use, if the point is to do contentious politics, all these tactics need to be repoliticized. So even strategic litigation
We can put some on this so that we can hear it.
Stage.
Não sei se está em casa com uma gravação.
Assumir dois ecrãs. Não está a assumir dois
versão.
ecrãs e.
Qualquer versão está bom.
Mas isso eu acho que está a fazer aqui. Não. Já. Zoom. Oi.
Good afternoon. I first want to thank our colleagues, Guya Accornero, Francesca Fortarezza, and Tiago Carvalho for organizing this wonderful seminar. This seminar series, which is always very interesting. I also want to greet my colleagues from this panel and the next panel. And I'm going to hopefully do a very short presentation, but bringing in the role that was, I think, the field where I've been working in the last, let's say, 5 years, which is not exactly about border violence and the response to border violence, but it's mostly about the role of academia, the role of higher educational institutions, programs, and the role we have, our responsibility on putting up these debates. And also some methodological challenges that come from our experiences of implementing these fields of studies here in Portugal, but in particular at our institution. So I'm going to begin with, let me see if I can, okay, sorry. So I'm going to begin trying to explain the process we have been doing at our university and the partnerships and the networking we have been doing to bringing in humanitarian action into the academia. So our, let's say our starting point was this. We were already engaged in migration studies. We were aware of some of the dynamics that were happening. And let me just show this slightly simple map that one of my colleagues organized. We could see a huge gap that was our starting also point for the process we engaged. At yellow, we can see countries that are funded and that benefit or are targeted for humanitarian assistance. At blue, we can see the countries where humanitarian action is stitched. And so we can see a huge gap between countries, countries where that have humanitarian disasters. So we thought this we could use this starting point to bring humanitarian action teaching, to try to do our contribute here in Portugal, but also to develop a network of teaching in this field at a more international level. And that's how it became this, let's say, process 5 years ago. And it became with some main objectives. First objective was to do some curricular innovation, because from our point of view, if you want to discuss, if you want to put issues like border violence and what is happening in Europe right now into research, it's very important we also start from discussing what are we teaching in our programs, what are we doing in our universities. So this process started with curricular innovation, curricular adaptation, and an interdisciplinary approach. So we organized a group of professionals from different backgrounds, from different social sciences studies, humanitarian law, geopolitical studies, and so on and so on. So logistics, and we formed a group of people that are putting up together the field of humanitarian action in our institution, but also trying to work to develop this field at a more global level. One of our starting points also was, if we want to discuss and have debates based on real the field. So part of our teaching programs, they rely on the idea that we have to bring in professionals and NGOs that are actually operating in the field at this moment. We also started revising the contents, the bibliographies of what we are doing, and trying to discuss if these bibliographies were or not very much focused on our own point of view, trying to discuss, are we going to have national debates, or are we going to bring in examples from different parts of the world? And so we started by doing a critical reflection about bibliography used, case studies approached, the teachers coming from different parts of the world and different backgrounds. In the Middle East, more refugees, or from Uganda, one of the countries that right now in Africa has a higher number of refugees and a large experience in managing humanitarian crisis, from the Portuguese-speaking countries, Mozambique. So we begin by building consortiums, networks of countries that are to whom these conversations, these debates interest. So we are still in that process, that is to ask ourselves, what conversations do we want to have in academia, with whom, with which countries, with which colleagues, and trying to bring in more and more people to these debates. So we developed to incentive students to do research in real humanitarian settings. So this was a huge challenge, because it's really difficult right now to have students doing research. And for this, it was very interesting last semester. Francesca Fortarezza came with her example to the class and to share with the other students the way she has been working in doing her research. And we try to develop partnerships that allow these mobilities of students and them to be in concrete field work. And as we are going to see later on, this is a huge, it's one of the challenges we have identified. Projects and curricular development projects that look into participatory methodologies. Methodologies organized with organizations, NGOs. So we try to understand, we did a mapping of Portuguese NGOs in Portugal, and we conducted some interviews and gathered some data along this process to understand how could we develop participatory methodologies in the applied to the humanitarian field, and in particular, how could we improve the evaluation of what is being done. So trying to develop the field of monitoring and evaluation in humanitarian because for many reasons, The use of participatory processes is demanding. It demands a lot of resources. It demands sometimes long periods in the field, and some of the NGOs have sometimes, and this is going to be interesting to debate and to hear about in the next panel. NGOs also have limitations of the time they spend in the field and the limitation of the duration of the projects. So departing from this point, we have been collecting some methodological challenges that we leave for the debate and for people who are doing research at the moment in this field. And are created in the co-creation of knowledge. When we do research, how do we identify these unequal power relations that are in the field, and how can we mobilize methodologies that respect the agency of displaced people, that respect and conduct research with a sensibility towards the position of displaced people, eventually the traumas they bring in these processes, and also the issues, the questions about representation. Who represents displaced people? How can we all contribute to show these issues when we produce knowledge and affected forced migration populations? This access sometimes includes risks. There are reporting that, as I highlighted here, we have been reported of increasing risks to humanitarian workers and researchers, but also other profiles such as journalists working in the field. And we have to take into account these risks, and we have to debate how are we going to produce research that has also to deal with this, and perhaps our networking with NGOs, our networking with academia, with also with the local actors could be a way of tackling this issue of and other colleagues that are right now at the moment doing research in the field can also tell us a bit more about that. But we have been receiving more and more reporting of these risks in the field. Another issue is that we try to include in the programs is studying the gap between policies and what is observed in the field. So more and more, we need to go beyond studying just the policies and the way they are reflected in documents, but trying to understand in the field how these policies operate, and are these policies even respected in the case they are under an agreement or not. And this is another challenge. Statistics, we work also at our university, but migration studies is based, and in my opinion, well, in collecting and identifying, characterizing the context based on statistics. But I have to recognize that along the years, more and more, we have to know well the statistics and the indicators that are collected, but also we have to study this gap between what is collected, what are the statistics and data telling us, mostly the mainstream data, but what are the situations that are not captured by this collection of statistics. And so how can we develop a set of methodologies and the research approaches that can go beyond and can complement and bring and that we have been very well, in my opinion, collecting, but that need to be put in perspective. Also, the issue more and more debated in our case that is the challenge between emergency situations and situations that become long-term humanitarian process, so protracted humanitarian situations. Many NGOs are called to the field in an emergency situation, but what we have seen is average crisis, humanitarian crisis, in average are more than 5 years, some 10 years, some are accumulating 15 years. And so how can we adapt? How can we begin discussing the what can we do together, NGOs and academia, to be able to study long-term processes and not only intervene in very circumstantial delimited situations. Other issues, and I'm taking too much time, other issues that we have identified is the challenge of using more and more methodologies that are adapted to work in these settings. So how are we going to do ethnographies in this context? How can we use arts-based methods, photo voice methodologies, methodologies that include visual documenting, and that give possibility to, in such challenging contexts, to go there and to collect data. Beyond the traditional methodologies that require sometimes much more time, but also that include much more sometimes hierarchical positionings and challenge in this field. Lastly, we have been working a lot on discussed issue of how to monitor and evaluate context and projects. So bringing in evaluation, not only as a means of reporting what has been happening at the end of a process, at the end of a project, but to co-design from the start, or to do together in a collaborative process, define from the start what are going to be the mechanisms if we are going to intervene in the field and do humanitarian interventions, what are the process we are going to establish with local actors and with displaced people or beneficiaries of our projects from the beginning to the end of the projects. And so put at the center of the interventions the beneficiaries of the projects. And finally, some ethical issues about the position of the researcher and of the displaced people. So I'm not going to go much further because I think I've taken so much time. But I just want to leave these are some tools that are already in place to be able to collect more information about the situation. This is, for example, migration corridors mapping from IOM, or so this is just to exemplify some of the tools that we can bring, some methodologies we can bring to document and to prepare for research and intervention in the field. And lastly, I leave just very recently, we had a summer winter school on humanitarian action, where we invited the Portuguese platform of NGOs, and we find very interesting some of the challenges that these NGOs are facing right now, and can connect with some of the issues that may be debated here in the next panel. This is a platform that represents more than 6. mostly working on development, but more and more.
To jest mój numer z roboty, więc możesz zapisać, bo mi się w tamtym zjebał głośnik, więc zwróć
More and more these organizations or some of these organizations are turning into the humanitarian field. And so in this process, some of the issues that they have raised are the difficult to access to the affected territories, once again, because of issues of security, but also of how to reach with the resources, the affected territories, security in the conflict areas, or the more and more having to deal with unhealthy environments in the field, the low volume of resources that they have to deal with the high number of crises, so increasing crises, not only conflict, but also of other nature, and the few resources they have to deal with this. The huge need of flexibility of action, so professionals that have to adapt to different settings and different contexts in the response. The increasing need of having a specialization and knowledge in the field, how to have a dialogue with the populations they are working towards, and the challenge of coordination and working in partnership, so between all the local entities, organizations, and so on. And another aspect that was raised was the need to have emergency plans, to design, plans to put on the field. So this was just some of the points that I thought would be interesting to connect with the next panel. And we just wanted to share very briefly the work we have been done towards developing humanitarian field at our higher educational institutes. Thank you.
I have them here. Teams are close. Yours is this one. Wait, I need to look into the files. Sorry.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. And of course, first of all, many thanks to the organizers but luckily I didn't have to take planes so because I live here. So I decided to present today my work, very much in progress, on solidarity framings and EU legal mobilization in the context of migration and asylum. And I chose to take this path because of a puzzle that troubles me and that is directly related to the focus of today's workshop. And the puzzle is the following: collective actions that mobilize European Union law in the context of migration and asylum oftentimes simultaneously challenge European Union law and its effects of border violence. In other words, they mobilize the promises made by European Union law against the operation of European Union law itself. And this is also visible in the European Citizens Initiative, which is a solidarity initiative that mobilizes the promises made by European Union law, especially in terms of fundamental rights, against the European Union itself. And my question is, if solidarity shapes, at least to some extent, European Union law, how come European Union law and policy also produces and sustains the border violence that we challenge? And I will argue that such tensions, such major tensions, are made possible not just by a violation of the part of European Union law that the Solidarity Initiative mobilized in European Union law of several conceptions of solidarity that operate in unequal and racialized ways. So, moving forward, if it moves. Okay, right. So before delving into the argument, a few words on what I mean by solidarity, and this is something that I take from the work of Nathalie Karagiani, a sociologist and a political scientist, who basically defines solidarity as a recurring specification of bonds between groups of people, and I would add, or entities with a legal personality, as this is the lawyer part of me that is being said. And this definition brings together a description of a social reality at a given time and a political project. Different political projects. Now, to capture the variety of usages of solidarity, I use the notion of framing, and this explains the title, to refer to potentially overlapping processes of both delimiting or containing in a frame, like a photograph, right? The phenomena that are seen and constructing contentious meaning. So I'm interested in how the meaning of solidarity is both delimited and challenged by different actors. And I will mostly talk today about European Union's understanding of solidarity to later draw some tentative conclusions, as the work is very much in progress, for its implications on collective actions that mobilize European Union law. We, European Union citizens, challenge on the basis of promises that European Union law itself makes through fundamental rights. There are two main, sometimes operating in conjunction, framings of solidarity in European Union law. That's an individual-centered solidarity, so basically solidarity with individuals, and state-centered solidarity, solidarity with states. Both shape European Union citizenship law and EU migration and asylum law, but as you might know, in very different ways. I will show that for European Union citizens, they work in the direction of a social solidarity to consolidate social bonds among a solidarity in the name of humanity, which is, however, oftentimes limited in a variety of ways, including through an kind of an interstate solidarity that conflicts with solidarity in the name of humanity. So basically, this is to say that individual-centered solidarity and state-centered solidarity exist both for European Union citizens and in the sphere of EU migration and asylum law, but in very different ways, and that for EU citizens, they kind of work towards a social solidarity for building social bonds, and for when it comes to non-EU citizens, they operate together at best in the name of humanity, but also very much in a way that bring moving forward. So this is a rough schematic representation of the two solidarity framings in European Union law, and I usually don't do this type of schemes, I must confess. But in this case, I find it helpful for the argument, and I also thought, well, this is not a law event, so I can feel more free to do whatever I want. So it's basically a continuum in the shape of a curve in which different regimes might have more or less solidarity with individuals and more or less solidarity with states. And somewhere in the middle of this curve, there will be a sort of apogee with about just as much solidarity with individuals as solidarity with the objective of establishing, just as much solidarity with individuals as solidarity with states. And when they kind of come together, they come together with the objective of establishing and consolidating social bonds. So this is the case for European Union citizens and actually especially workers who benefit from a legal regime geared towards social solidarity, and that goes through a project of establishing the internal market. Now, this has been visible since the very origins of the European Union, actually, under the then European Economic Community, which even before the creation of the concept of European Union citizenship, included included a provision that actually continued to be included in every treaty revision to this very day. It's a provision that in which there is a recognition that treaties contribute to a so-called ever closer union among the peoples of Europe, right? An expression that implicitly refers to the idea of social bonds, basically, right? And there's actually a recent historical work that has shown that the term peoples has been used since the very beginning to exclude people from the colonies, knowing that 4 of the original 6 member states were still colonial powers when the European Economic Community was created in 1957, right? So although they were sort of technically part of we would sort of think that they were technically part of the European Economic Community, they were in the same time excluded at a time when the concept colonial, the 4 of the original 6 member states were still colonial powers with colonial territories. So today, the social solidarity projects for European Union citizens is especially visible in a legal regime that recognizes their mobility rights and a relatively wide conception of equal treatment. So, for instance, you have here on the slide a provision from the Treaty on the European Union that in which free movement is presented as a kind of an offer to European Union citizens, an offer made by the EU to the citizens. But in the same time ensured, it says, in conjunction with measures like external border controls and preventing crime and so on and so forth. Now, European Union citizens also benefit, so this is mobility, EU citizens also benefit from equal treatment, and in European Union law that is hardly conceived as related to free movement, in the sense that free movement is conceived as implying non-discrimination on the basis of nationality for issues such as employment and even social welfare. But equal treatment can also go beyond nationality, especially in the area of employment. Equal treatment on basis of gender, age, race, and so on. But if we look closer to the regimes of equal treatment, so I'm not saying that it works in the same way for all EU citizens. Like, this is not the idea that I want to convey, because if we look closer at the provisions on equal treatment for EU citizens, we can also non-EU citizens. I think an important first observation is that EU law defines whatever solidarity it acknowledges for them in opposition to the social solidarity for EU citizens. And this is visible in that provision that I put here on this slide, where kind of the freedom of movement is presented as an offer to citizens, and it goes in conjunction with external border controls. So by contrast to the social solidarity designed for EU citizens and mostly workers, non-European Union citizens can benefit at best, I argue, from a solidarity framed in the name of humanity and not in the name of an objective to consolidate social bonds. Mentioned already some of them, because we're talking about the European Citizens Initiative. So that includes the prohibition of inhuman and degrading treatment, the right to seek asylum, and this form of solidarity is also visible in part of European Union secondary legislation that seeks to give effect to these rights. And that, of course, includes all the legislation on international protection and the statuses, refugee status, subsidiary protection, and temporary protection. But this human solidarity, although framed in universal terms, is considerably limited by at least three aspects, I argue. The first is, well, an interstate solidarity that conflicts often rather than converging with human solidarity. And an simply invisible in terms of legally accepted understanding of racial discrimination. Now, so for the first limit, I will start with a narrow conception of discrimination. So non-discrimination is a right that is included in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union and is stated in universal terms, but first of all, the Court of Justice of the EU decided that discrimination based on nationality, well, is prohibited only in relation to EU member states, nationals, right? So discrimination based on nationality, as far as the European Union law is concerned, does not apply basically to non-EU citizens. Another thing, when it comes to the European Union Race Equality Directive, which prohibits direct and indirect discrimination based on racial and ethnic origin, well, it's not confined to European Union citizens, but it also states that it does not cover the difference of treatment based on nationality, and is without prejudice to provisions and conditions that relate to the entry into and residence of third country, meaning non-EU nationals, because that's the term that EU law uses for non-EU citizens, third country nationals, and basically to any treatment which arises from the legal status of the third country nationals concerned. So what does it mean? It basically means, to simplify, it means that non-EU citizens are protected from racial and ethnic discrimination only after they become so-called irregular migrants on the territory of the EU. Right. Now, one of the implications of this limited understanding of discrimination is that European Union visa policies can be discriminatory. The EU can make it, in other words, more difficult for some people to reach the EU merely because of their nationality, a differential treatment that might work in conjunction with that based on racial and ethnic origin. And if we look at the countries that are subject to visa requirements under European Union law, it is striking that most of these countries are former colonies, which basically are, so to speak, on a blacklist, and that most of the countries exempted from visas are predominantly white populated countries. Creates more obstacles to reach the EU for the predominantly non-white world. So if you can see from this map, it's basically the gray part is for those countries that require visa. So basically, the EU Schengen visa regime creates more obstacles to reach the EU for the predominantly non-white world, all of Africa except Seychelles and Mauritius, and almost all of Asia. Now, to put it in solidarity terms, human solidarity does not go so far as to cover the visa racialized treatment, which creates a regime of non-entrée for the non-white world, and it contrasts sharply with the regime of social solidarity confined to European Union citizens. Now, one of the main consequences of this unequal operation of solidarity is that many of those who are subject to visa requirements basically oftentimes have, of course, little choice but to reach the EU through irregular means, which means that they are subject to the highly securitized EU border management and control with Frontex as the main coordinator. And this limits European Union's promise of human solidarity in relation to these people in considerable ways, as it leads to people risking their lives to reach the EU and sometimes even drowning in the Mediterranean. Another important consequence has been the differential treatment of those who have fled the Russo-Ukrainian war and those who have fled the conflict in the Middle East and Africa during the 2015-16 so-called crisis. Now, Ukrainians have benefited since 2017 from a liberal short-term visa regime, and although the Temporary Protection Directive, which was applied for the first time in 2022, does not condition its application to a liberal visa regime, this was a consideration taken into account by the Council in its implementing decision of 2022. So this created a more welcoming regime for those fleeing the Russo-Ukrainian war, and most of those who came from Middle Eastern and African countries, especially in 2015, but also before and to this day, did this also meant that they have been, so people coming from the Middle East and Africa, they have been and continue to be subject to an interstate solidarity that often conflicts with, rather than converging with, human solidarity. So this is the third limit that I wanted to mention. I'm not sure if I was time. Am I okay? Yeah. So interstate solidarity, well, it's basically the idea of solidarity with states, and it can be a intra-EU or extra-EU solidarity. It mainly takes the form of burden sharing, which often becomes actually burden shifting, within a logic that access to the EU, access to international protection, and humane treatment. Now, a few examples. So, for instance, the operational support provided to member states by the EU via Frontex is conceived in terms of solidarity with states, right? So it is a form of solidarity. So we sort of, from the bottom-up solidarity initiatives side, we sort of see this as a failure, and justly so, the failure of solidarity. But on the institutional side, it is conceived as a form of solidarity with states, because it's about providing operational support to member states. Now, Frontex, of course, operates with a strong security logic, with its preventive and migration management role, and contributes to the creation of more dangerous routes, and even engages in pushbacks. And there have been several attempts made to make Frontex accountable before the Court of Justice of the EU, but to my knowledge, they have all failed to this date. The support provided to member states by the other agency, the EU Agency for Asylum, does not improve this situation, at least because, well, one, its budget is about 5 times lower than Frontex. Frontex has the budget of 845 million euros, and the EU Agency for Asylum has a budget of 180 million. And second of all, well, nothing can counterbalance the production of more dangerous routes to the EU, pushbacks, and death at sea. Okay. This is another example of so-called interstate solidarity, and that's another such mechanism has been said to stem from by now infamous Dublin III regulation, which establishes the criteria for determining the member state responsible for the application for international protection. A European Parliament brief published in 2022 on solidarity in EU asylum policy referred to the discretionary clause from the Dublin regulation that allows member states to declare themselves responsible on humanitarian grounds, even when they are not responsible under the standard criteria of Dublin. But several issues with this clause. Well, one is that it is left to member states' discretion, so oftentimes it's just they don't act upon it. And second, if anything, this clause shows that the standard criteria themselves, the standard Dublin criteria themselves, are based on processes of burden shifting and not burden sharing, burden shifting to frontline member states like Greece and Italy, with devastating another example, and I'm coming to the conclusion slowly but steadily. So another example is an extra European Union interstate solidarity, which is basically usually understood as based on cooperation with third countries. But the logic here is very much about burden shifting, now essentially to third countries. And a notable and infamous example is the EU-Turkey statement, which again, on the institutional level, is conceived in some ways as based on solidarity. Turkey, under this statement, is to accept the return of all migrants not in need of international protection from Greece. You would agree to resettle a Syrian for every Syrian readmitted to Turkey. So it's kind of like exchange deal that objectifies the asylum seekers and migrants. Now, this deal has been presented in terms of solidarity as one, it allegedly would provide relief for Greece, which it didn't really, and two, it would alleviate Turkey's burden as first country of refuge. So this is how, in their wicked understanding of solidarity, how it works, basically. But we do know that the statement has had the effect of preventing rather than facilitating access to international protection. So that, again, it goes in conflict with human solidarity. And it also consolidated inhuman and degrading treatment of the so-called irregular migrants. Now, a few tentative thoughts on the implications for EU legal mobilization, and these are really tentative thoughts that I basically made, drafted this morning while realizing that the presentation was today, not tomorrow. So what does this mean for collective actions such as the Citizens' Initiative that mobilize the promises of EU law against EU law itself? Well, I would say that as a tentative thought that exposing the tensions of European Union law is important, but not enough. I think it's also important to think about how we expose them. What exactly do I mean is basically, if we think about just exposing the tensions of EU law, so, you know, just EU law having provisions on a human and degrading treatment, when we expose these tensions in these terms, it's important, but might not be enough, especially if on the side of the EU institutions, the answer would be, well, look, we have provisions on human solidarity. The EU is committed to fundamental rights. We will keep being committed to fundamental rights, and the EU is all about rule of law and all these beautiful ideals. And then what? We have to wait then for violations to happen, and then we go to court, as I think you brilliantly showed. Then we go to court, and by the way, the actions before the court are not always successful. So then we sort of still keep having this more structural tension about the different meanings of solidarity. So maybe we should the structural tensions between different conceptions of solidarity. Perhaps that can help us push for a wider, first of all, for a wider understanding of human solidarity, and perhaps maybe, this is my wish, but with a view to getting closer in the long term to social solidarity, not just for EU citizens, but also for migrants and asylum seekers, right? And when we can do that in a variety of ways, and I think that also includes education, and personally, this is what I also try to do as an academic, to kind of look at my students as potential agents of change and to involve them in discussions about sort of more structural tensions and how we need to kind of rethink the system. And I do that in the classroom, but also as a coordinator of the Refugee and Migration Clinic, in which students organize academic events, activist campaigns, engage with NGOs, and deal with real-life cases. So thank you.
Thank you, the three of you, very much. I think it was very interesting to have three perspectives from, let's say, grassroots organization and civil society, from the academic side, and then the legal perspective. So now it's the floor is open for questions, both at home. If you want, you can. Yeah, they can speak from home, or should, yeah. So not necessarily right in the chat, but you can also directly turn on the mic and intervene. It's always like this at the beginning. I mean, I have, maybe I can break the ice with a question. Perfect. No, then you go first. Yeah. You have priority for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really like the interventions of for Veronica, and I thought it's very interesting that you also brought the moment where we could see more clearly the double standards in the response to the Ukrainian crisis and respect to the so-called refugee 2015 crisis. And I wonder if from those first moments where we realized that the response was going to be very different, till now, did any reflection, was any reflection made by, in terms of legislation or so on, countries that changed their position, or are we still having the same, let's say, fast and more very curious about if any reflection was made about these double standards in the meantime, and that's was the question. And also for Federico, you were talking about the role of the local actors, and since I'm not that much knowledge of the situation in Italy right now, if you could share a bit more about what's the role of these local organizations in the response in the field, since I'm not that familiar, but I'm curious about how are people mobilizing at the moment. Of course, this may change a lot from context to context, but if you could say something.
If there is some question from home or from the public, we can collect a few and then let speakers respond. Okay, I'm gonna make my question, and maybe it's actually for the three of you. It's the transversal question, because I think it's very interesting that from different perspectives we've been talking about violations that state or governmental actors exercise against people on the move, and they're kind of clearly violation of international human rights law or of humanitarian law or the asylum regime. Now, my question is, it appears to me, it seems to me that states are also learning how to elude this situation or informality and opacity in the way they operate, so that they can actually violate the law, but without being held accountable for the violations that they perpetrate. So how do we, as civil society, as academics, and from a legal perspective, how can we address this gray zone, which is not full legality, is not full illegality, but still perpetrates a violent regime that is difficult to keep accountable for? Okay, maybe we can start.
Great questions. Thank you both. So maybe I'll start with Francesca's. Kind of, getaway, basically, to devise strategies that go more in the direction of informality. And I think one of the latest examples is the EU-Tunisia deal, right? Which is, well, it's a deal, but not a deal. You know, it's like it's a memorandum of understanding, right? It's a memorandum of understanding in law. Basically, it means that it's not considered a treaty, an international treaty. So that means that it does not have to go through all the procedures that treaties need to go through, which includes also some parliamentary control in the process. And also it cannot be legally reviewed if it complies with fundamental rights or not, crucially. So I think this is like, wow, right? So I totally see this phenomenon that you're talking about, but how do and I try to make students aware of how controversial this is, and that clearly that there is bad faith going on from states. But how to go beyond that? How to, for instance, how to do it through legal mobilization before courts? Well, we did have an attempt before the Court of Justice of the EU, and it didn't work precisely because of that, right? So the EU-Turkey statement has been challenged before courts, and the response of the Court of Justice of the EU was that, well, it's not my competence. This is not a EU act. I need a EU act to say if it complies. But this is not the EU act. These are member states. They so this was the response of the Court of Justice of the EU. And so how after that to think of maybe Federico, you know how to, because you talked about illegal mobilization, I would be very curious to know how can we use the strategic litigation in these instances, or is it because of this sort of informality that basically gets in the way of recognizing something as a legal act that we need in order to contest it? Paradoxically, that's how the law thinks. So that's yeah, that would be my reply. And for Joanna's question, I think, just to be clear, I don't think that I presented the sort of double the operation as always, because there were also some but in a sense it also confirms the double standard, because, well, people who were fleeing the Russo-Ukrainian war, who were basically Black, they were stopped at the border, and those who were Roma people basically could not get access to residence once they, even though they got to the EU, then they were witnessing unequal treatment just because they were Roma people, although they were still also fleeing the Russo-Ukrainian war. And I think that some countries, they do kind of have more now, they retreat a bit more. I think Hungary, which is not surprising, and
well, thank you, and all the questions. I will start with the first one, Joanna, because it's, maybe I have some answers, because in the second one, more the first one, I mean, how good the situations on the ground in Italy. I think it depends very much on the borders we're talking about, because different borders present, of course, different needs, different challenges, and different opportunities at the same time. I would say, first of all, that years of repression, of solidarity, I mean, have had their effects in solidarity right now. So it's not, like, generally speaking, if I look at the different situations of Italian borders, we can see that there have been many attempts at the time to, you know, create difficulties, to criminalize, different ways to repress activities of solidarity actors. I think if I look at external borders physically, which is essentially, first of all, I would say sovereignty, for some reasons, we still have different actors, in most cases it's international actors, so it's not just activity made by Italians. So I think it's also interesting and important to see the transnational component in the solidarity movement. So we still have these actors active at sea, but with many more difficulties than in the past, and less actors are active right now. I mean, we see also back to the issue of data or figures that we have, and, of course, with all the spread we could see right now, but its initiatives is really dropped, like dramatically dropped from a few years ago. And so today, counts just for 10% of the people that are rescued, and this is really the effect of increased criminalization over time. So it's impossible, it's very difficult and very costly for these initiatives to actually be actively received, even financially. Because when you have to defend yourself in court, when you have to pay fines, etc., really, or even now that this is a new policy of sending civil society ships very far away from the CIES disembarkation harbors. In northern Italy, most of the times, of course, there's many days at sea, many more days of navigation. This sort of civil society ships, and that creates a problem. Then, of course, about the land borders, I would not say anything on the Trieste and Balkan situation, because I think that this is an answer that you in the same time can definitely give us way better than I would. But I would say that in the land borders, this is something that, especially in the public debate in Italy, I think it's something that has been overlooked, but in a very guilty and terrible way, like the situation of the land borders. So seeing in particular, not only, maybe we talk also about the situation of Trieste, especially in the last years, this is being increasingly present in the media. But the understanding of what happens in Italy as let's say, considering Italy as a transit country, so understanding also that there are to other countries in Europe. This is something which is completely out of the public debate. Of course, we talk about that, but we are a bubble of people that are really that we care about migration. But this is out of the debate, and that could be done on purpose, because then, this would be in contradiction with the invasion propaganda. If we say that people don't actually want to see Italy, but they actually want to go to other countries, this would be completely against this imagination that people are fed with, or everybody just want to go to Italy and stay in Italy. So there is very little attention to what is happening, for example, the border with France, and we know that there are massive human rights violations there, and also the important visa violations. If I think about the Schengen regime and these controls that are in place again, even though they shouldn't be there. And there are important initiatives that the state in its different components, including assistance to a certain extent. Land borders are another story. And so this first help and first assistance is a legal act that is actually seated in place of the land borders. And just to briefly mention, if we think of borders, I think that, transit creates like borders in the daily activity of people. So I think it's also important to mention all the activities that take place in Italy. I think there is in transit, most of the times they have also problems in finding a way to buying a ticket to go from one place to another to continue the journey. So these kind of initiatives, also providing shelter to people in transit, are very important and still active. But I have to say that criminalization has given all these initiatives a big price to pay. Moving to the second question, I totally agree on I would also done the example of the Utah statement, and so the effects that of what it tells us in terms of how effective can be this way of running away from the scrutiny of courts. but also the scrutiny of parliament, the scrutiny of, it's running away from democracy. That's the problem. It's, I think it is a matter of democracy. It is a matter of who decides what. And this is something that we've seen like a tendency in that sense of, having all the time many more policies decided at governmental levels, both at the European Union level, but also nationally. So parliaments are completely marginalized. There is courts are marginalized. There is this attempt at using informality, and also the Tunisia example is relevant, but I would think also from an Italian perspective, this agreement between Italy and Albania now, to build to reception and detention centers in Albania for processing asylum requests and for creation. If it's an international agreement, so there is still much debate on that. I would say this is the effect of legal mobilization. So I think this is, in a way, we created this. So I would go back to the dialectic approach in a way. So if criminalization created legal mobilization created this running away from democracy and from the scrutiny of courts. So now it's our move, and I would say that our move is maybe trying to focus on the concrete effect of policies rather than on the legal acts on which these policies are based. I take examples in Italy from at a certain point there was during the ministership of Salvini and on no legal act. So that he was was prohibiting the entrance into the Italian territorial waters of CIES organization ship without providing any legal acts. It was just public declaration, and this was something which could be effective in terms of, okay, I'm not giving any legal acts. You cannot challenge anything because there is nothing actually. Then there were some communications by his chief of staff, but it was something which was not even an administrative act. Yet, this trial is facing in Palermo, these charges for kidnapping, they're based on the effects of this policy. I think also this initiative promoted at the International Criminal Court, crimes against humanity for the cooperation between the European Union, some member states, and Libyan authorities. Again, this is not based on the legal acts that were actually promoted, but on the flows of money, the fact that money went from the European Union to Libya, and this creates some complicity. Doesn't matter what the legal status of the agreements were. This may be an option. I don't know if this will work or not. I think it could be a way to overcome this thing of running away from the norms.
And follow the money is usually the way in which you follow criminal organizations. So I think
conclude briefly. I think we have clearly identified consensus shared from so many countries, but that's not the way things are going right now. There are a number of discretionary decisions that are being taken on a daily basis. Some more assumed than others. States are more and more bold in assuming they are not following these humanitarian principles. I don't have an answer on how to contrast that for everyone else, but I think from our point of view of the academia, I think we have to keep working on documenting what is happening and documenting towards displacement and bringing up into these debates and conversations these several gray zones that we mentioned here along the way, and reinforce the issue of the accountability, documented and bring accountability into the table. There is a beautiful book by a colleague that colleague has edited, Yasmin Guya, that is called Dignity on the Move, that talks about, and I think brings about this issue on how are we going to address the issue of dignity on the move. We have to ensure that we keep this as a focus along the way. So that's how I want to finish the intervention.
In case someone has questions, you have 2 minutes, so in case, feel free.
Right. I have a question.
Could I maybe? In here.
It's a question about what
It's just for the people from home.
So the question would be about why not including the people that are working as co-authors instead of just asking them to intervene with ethnographic work or arts-based projects? Why not adding them as co-authors? Because participating due alongside the works. I think it's something that is being done in Uganda, in Kampala. Could be interesting. Of course, we have actual considerations to bear in mind. Actual committees in the universities and so on. Could be a
Maybe I can also look into this the audience. Further. So the point is, my point is, from the perspective of country of Portugal, where they're not, I think the discourse about refugees and this kind of problems is not so present in the public sphere, and it's not as much as in Italy. I know that in Italy we have many students, scholars, and PhD students, master students, or bachelor students that are interested in this, because it's really kind of crucial. It's kind of border country or border countries in Europe, etc. So there is and how is the perspective of students? And I will often have a bit of the students here in the room, which is the perspective that you have after listening to this presentation, this debate, from coming from a country as Portugal, where there is not the same pressure and also not the same debate in the public sphere. If you are you connected? Those maybe the students that you have working on these fields are coming from other countries many times, and also we wanted to also bridge a bit the next panel where we will have Francesca going to Vita to more work acting in this field, but Vita is acting in another field which is housing rights, and this is also I think we also need to reflect the fact of on the borders that we have inside the society. So the borders to citizenship that are existing inside the society to the it's not just the borders when we enter that we pass the borders, and after there are borders inside the society that allow the what will be the young audience.
Very shortly, I totally agree. I think when we talk about participatory methodologies, we also have to include the possibility of directly engage the beneficiaries or the population that we are studying from the start of the research processes or the humanitarian projects. This has been done by a number of cases, a number of organizations. It poses some challenges because sometimes there's a challenge of me, it makes totally sense to work towards that deadline. That project that I was mentioning in the beginning, we have a consortium with Turkey and Colombia and Brazil, where we are discussing these participatory methodologies. They start from this principle, working from the beginning in the design of the mechanisms of implementing and evaluating the projects and different projects. So this also with that one. And regarding reflection of Guya, I see many students. Of course, I think at a certain point they understand the differences from our small national context of 2,000 refugees or efforts that some other countries do in the refugee response. I think I see a lot of interest from the students to make, I don't know if Veronica confirms that also in her institution, but there are years in which we have like 10, 15 people wanting to work about refugees situation. So forced migration is a field that is of interest not only of Portuguese students, but more and more from the international students that we have. And then there is a challenge, as I was saying, of access to the field, how to have resources to conduct research, and these we need to improve and to work better with them. But I think the interest is there, genuinely.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to confirm that I also seen the same thing in my classes. Many of the students are here in Portugal very interested. So even to participate in the Nova Refugee Clinic, I sometimes have much more demands than the capacity to include in students in the setting. So which is just a pity, but that's how it is. I would say that I also have a few international students. So oftentimes Italian students, they come to my class. So, and what I noticed, but then I don't want to sort of overgeneralize, but I did notice that at least the Italian students that I had, that they were, let's say, a bit more aware of how bad things are. It's like everybody knows it's bad, but not everybody knows how bad it is. So yeah, that's maybe we can hear some opinions from the audience as students here in Portugal.
Yeah. So there's gonna be a break now, half an hour, if I'm correct. Just to let you know, if anyone is interested, there is the possibility to actually sign the European Citizen Initiative Stop Border Violence, which is the main reason we are all here. So I'm gonna include Paula in this. At home. Yeah, okay, maybe we can share again your presentation with the, yes.
Maybe we can do it now during the break.
Yeah.
As well.
I will leave it open here. I'm gonna do it in a second. And we are gonna meet here in half an hour at 5, and it's gonna be more activist oriented, and there's gonna be Francesco and there's gonna be Rita. And again, feel free to raise your doubts, questions, and even contrary opinions. We are happy to debate them. Pausar a gravação. Sim.
Okay, so we'll start the second half of our workshop today, and I hope you have time to have coffee and a brownie as well.
Thank you.
Having said that, the second panel is called "It's Time to Unite in a Common Political Action." We have two people that have been or are involved in European citizen initiatives. One on housing. Okay, from Lina Dombra and Francesco is a filmmaker and communication designer, amongst the founders of Lina Dombra. I think you will have time to explain what it is. A volunteer and activist, a volunteers and activist organization born in Trieste in 2019 that helps people on the move along the Balkan route, both on the internal and external border of the EU, and which is active daily in Trieste. Lina Dombra is also on missions in Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, and Bulgaria. We'll also have Rita Silva left. And Rita has a long trajectory of remember correctly, and starting from a group called Solidariedade Imigrante, and then later on founded Vita, and is currently in the movement Vida Justa, who works with suburban populations and minorities mainly, and is also finishing her PhD that we look forward to read in political economy and the financialization of housing in Portugal. I'll give you the floor, guys. I'll leave the table. This is self-managed, as all the social movements should be. And who wants to go first, so I can help you with? Right, recording. I'll just put.
Wow. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks to the organizers. As Tiago said, my name is Francesco. I live in Trieste since 2019, and since the day three, when I was in Trieste, I started working with and for migrants along the Balkan route. Together with other people, we founded Linea d'Ombra. Literally translated is the shadow line. What we do is a daily presence in front of the train station of Trieste, which is a point of passage for many people on the move. We can say that 80% of the people that pass by wants to reach another European country and do not want to stay in Italy. And we provide the first welcome, basically distribution of clothes, shoes, food. We give legal and medical assistance. Also, what we do is to inform and kind of be witness of what happens, and we go on mission along the Balkan route, mainly in Bosnia, Serbia, and recently in Bulgaria as well. What we do is basically facing the lacks of the local and national institution, which should provide a minimum shelter to all the migrant people, and they, of course, they do not. I will not spend too much time on the Linea d'Ombra organization because it's not the main topic, but it's open for questions. Just to give you a couple of numbers, in 2022 alone, we met almost 14,000 people. And right now, as I'm talking, there are around in a complete state of abandonment from the institution. I say asylum seeker, and when I say asylum seeker, I'm also saying that they, by law, should deserve a shelter over their head, which is not provided. So, during the last 4 years, we have witnessed all the violence that the external borders, the European borders, Frontex, the border police can inflict on human body and their dignity. I will not focus on this because I don't like this kind of pornography. But, we've also been witnessing the solidarity, on the other hand, fortunately. So we witnessed the growth of a network of individuals and organizations that started supporting us. It's very strange. Started supporting us, not just in Italy, but all around the European Union. We receive donations and support from Germany, from France, from many countries, and also I would say it's many also national televisions from Spain, Holland, France came to tell the story of what's happening there in Trieste. So we feel, we know kind of that there's a vast population, there's a good portion of European population and organizations that stand in solidarity with migrant people, that stands for the basic human rights. The point is that we do not have a political weight. We're not being listened to. Yes, there's this feeling, I feel like I am a European citizen, but there's a lack of active citizenship at a communitarian level. Feels like the distance stands between me living in Trieste and the policymakers somewhere else in Europe brings in a lack of motivation, a lack of involvement, and therefore a lack of motivation, and therefore a lack of the taking of responsibility towards certain things that can be done. One thing I want to state is that it is important to act at all possible levels. There's not just one that is better. If we don't act on all possible levels, it's kind of useless. I'm referring specifically to, I don't know, it's important to be on the borders, supporting people on the move. It is important to be in the streets and in the squares of our cities to support people that are just right. You can touch them. It's important to do demonstrations, as Federico was also saying. And with this, I'm also, for example, first thing that comes to my mind is the action that Juan Branco and Omer Schatz did in 2019 from Peripio. They sued the European Union at the International Court of Justice. But that's also a good thing. Okay, so today we're here to, oh, I forgot to put on the slides. Sorry. Okay, this was the slide that was supposed to be there. Okay, so the one tool I wanted to talk about today is the European Citizen Initiative. It's, I guess, the only participative democratic tool, directly democratic tool we have as citizen to face the European institution and the European Commission. And it's a pity that almost nobody knows about its existence. So what's it about? It's basically a collection of signatures, a petition. In the time span of 12 months, we need to collect 1 million, at least 1 million signature, reaching a minimum threshold in at least 7 European countries. This would force the European Commission to give an answer to a specific question or proposal. This tool, this nice tool, I would say, was born in Lisbon in 2009. But it was implemented only, so the first initiative started only 7 years later in 2016. Back in the day, it was almost impossible to collect the signatures because it was like a bureaucratically hard. I don't know. In 2021, there was some kind of an update, so a digital platform was financed. European Citizen Initiative. Since 2016, so in the last 7 years, only 9 initiatives came to success, and mainly all of them were based on the animals' rights. The most important one, I think, was the one on the bee, supporting the bee population in Europe. I must say, once again, that this is not a petition like the one we could do on change.org, where we put our signature and then that doesn't have a practical legal weight. When we give the support to a citizen initiative, it has a legal weight. With a bunch of people spread through Italy and the European Union, individuals, towards the freedom of movement and the respect of migrant people. We still don't have the means probably to do it perfectly because we have zero budget, and someone told us that it's easy. You have to spend at least €500,000 to make such an initiative work. Also, we didn't have a structure, an organization, or something that could be kind of centrally from a center organize and manage the campaign. So we kind of bravely decided to go for a decentralized way. We wanted everybody to know about this initiative and everybody to take responsibility with it. So it's not just about signing it. If you just sign it, you're the work that's been done so far is basically a volunteer job. I myself made the website, for example. Okay, so since it was the very first attempt to make a European Citizen Initiative on the topic of fundamental human rights and migrants, we wanted it to be able to reach the widest audience, the widest amount of adhesions possible. So we didn't make it too strict. We didn't say we want to abolish Frontex, for example. We decided to put it on Francesca was saying, on the article number 4 on the European Charter on Fundamental Rights. The article number 4 states that no one shall be subject to torture or to inhuman. I don't know anybody that would say, yes, I stand with torture. Okay, but even a person that is far right, that thinks that the border control are a good thing and should be implemented even more, they would say, okay, I want the basic human rights to be respected. Fact, yes, the article number 4 is not respected at all. It's not respected on the borders, where violent pushbacks happen all the time. Think about Frontex, for example, that was quoted. It's not respected even inside the national and European borders. If you think about the detention centers, for example, and life conditions in those. I know specifically one in Gradisca, close to Trieste, where in the last 3 years, at least 6 people of abandonment of those 350 people in the ruins of a warehouse amongst the rats and under the rain. That's also degrading treatment. And even if we go outside of the European Union, when we get to other countries, those with which we have externalized the border in an interstate solidarity, well, those places do not respect the article number 4. Think about Libya, Tunisia, Turkey, and recently in Italy, we're talking about Albania as well. So we wrote a proposal in order to touch all these possible points. We are asking basically to stop the pushbacks and the violence, and then more specifically to end all the We started collecting the signatures the 10th of July of this year. We have time until the 10th of July of the next year. And I know that 1 million signatures is a lot, especially if you have to reach a minimum threshold in at least 7 countries. We are not sure that we are going to make it at all, but still it is worth it to try. And we can see some good and pragmatic results already. We can see them from July till now. Initiative, that's itself something very useful, because I like to imagine a future where all the European citizens know that they can spend 5 minutes a month on a platform, this platform, citizen-initiative.europa.eu, and sign the petitions and support those political things that they like more. For example, this morning I woke up, I checked the website, and I signed a petition that is called Tax the Rich. Okay. So, just to say. So even beside this specific initiative that we are carrying on, that's just a result on my personal point of view. The other point is, while we carry on this initiative on migrants' rights, we are building more knots on the network, and we are creating new connections. And those new connections, even though we are acting mainly online, we know each other digitally, they have concrete outcomes in the life of activists or organizations. Just to make an example that regards myself, a month ago, before the starting of the collection of the signature, I got in contact. I was making research. We need someone in Bulgaria to talk about the initiative, and I found out that there was an association of lawyers called Voice in Bulgaria. They do advocacy, and I got in contact with them, and they were like, "Ah, nice. Yes, we want to support this initiative." Fast forward, in September, we went on also search and rescue in the forests on the border, where people tend to, I don't think, sometimes you find dead bodies, sometimes you find people with a broken leg because of the violence of the police, sometimes you find exhausted people that just need an ambulance. And in that case, I found myself in front of facing the border police of Bulgaria, which is not nice and does not speak a single word of English. And I was not really aware of what were my rights in that country and so on. But I could make a phone call to these people I contacted for the European Citizen Initiative, and they kind of saved the situation. This is just a stupid example, I know, and it's very personal. I could have found a better one, maybe. But I don't know, even during monthly meeting we've been doing, there were people living in the same country, for example, people living in Athens. So, getting towards the conclusion, we can easily say that EU migration policies and respect of the basic human rights are kind of worsening day by day, finding new ways to outsmart the legal situation, as we discussed. And that's the reason why we should and I think we must act even more actively. But everyone following her own sensitivity in any way. I thought it's like important to act at all possible levels, so choose yours. I'm not saying that you need to be on the border. I'm not saying that you need to face the police. I'm not saying that you need to do illegal stuff, even though I would try. It's nice. You don't need just like, I don't know, signing this initiative and then pushing it forward, for fostering it, making more people know about the democratic tool, start your own initiative to have more people to know about it. That's a good starting point. So if you want to scan the QR code, it takes 20 seconds. Thanks.
Are you in contact with Solidariedade Imigrante?
No, here.
Yeah.
No. In Portugal was a hard country. We started well with the Cruz Vermelha in Bragança,
Okay.
and then they disappeared completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should talk about
Yes, let's talk about it later.
Yeah. Okay.
Precisas de computador?
Não.
Não. Então, deixamos.
Isso pode ficar. Hello, thank you for the invitation. So I was a little bit surprised because I'm not studying these kind of things, and I have not been acting so much in the field of migrant issue, even if I started my activist life in this field of migrant issues. But after I understood better, it is because I participated in an European citizen initiative that people tried to do around 2017, 2018, I think, and it was around housing. And I come here to tell you about this story. I think it is good to depart from a concrete case and maybe to do it better one day, whatever. But I think it worth to discuss it. So I'm going to tell what happened, and after my personal view of what I think there were the problems. So in fact, because I think that European Citizen Initiative can be a very interesting tool or tactic to promote the struggle, but it is very challenging, and we should think about that. But congratulations for you too, that you started and you tried. Yes. So, in fact, the European Union competence a consensus that that there is a competence in the European Union around the housing policies. I think that today is more clear that, in fact, the European Union can impact very much in the housing policies, but still the competencies on housing are mainly in the national states, okay? But still, I think we can find ways to address European Union level. So the story is that a group of people in Austria contacted us, that we were an organization of housing in that time, Habita, to develop ECI in the housing field. And first we accepted, and after we traveled to Austria was the European Commission made a definition of social housing, that social housing should be just for the poor, not for the middle class, middle income people. So this has impacts in certain countries that develop social housing for also the middle classes. And I'm talking about here about Netherlands and Austria and maybe Finland, but not so many countries in Europe anymore that promote this kind of policies. So the thing was that there was later a court decision in Netherlands because of this one. There was a court decision of an European court social housing to private promoters that were promoting non-for-profit. They were what the court said was that the public funding should not be used to fund non-for-profit private promoters that were developing social housing for middle class in Netherlands, okay? So this was the big problem for Austria, okay? As you can imagine, for us in Portugal, this is completely another world, okay? We don't have this kind of problems because our kind of problems, we don't have social housing, nor we have private promoters, non-for-profit private promoters developing. They invited people from countries in the south and in the eastern part of Europe, and we were just like, this is not a problem that we care about, but there is a huge housing problem in our countries. There was also another problem, that is they wanted to say affordable housing. So they wanted to, their main message was, we want affordable housing. And in fact, in that moment, affordable housing was developed. The language is important, is what I want to say. Affordable housing, the concept of affordable here in Portugal was being used by the government to say that, to substitute social housing for affordable housing, and to say that now the of tax exemptions is going to be 20% lower of the middle of the market, which is not affordable, in fact. So we didn't want to use this language because affordable housing was exactly what the government in Portugal was using, and also in England too. And in that moment, England was still more or less inside. So yes, it was in this phase. So of course we didn't. As you can see, there are different contexts, different institutional paths, and historical and social and political and cultural paths, and the way that the problems hit the ground in different countries are different. And so and in fact, what I felt too was that they were not so interested about all the other problems. Their aim was still that one. Okay, so we tried to negotiate together what kind of demands were possible to include, what kind of tax would be acceptable, because it was not so easy to have a tax that would be accepted by the European Union, and what kind of tax could mobilize in different countries. And the problem is that even if we were demanding these kind of things, I think that the ones that were paying, that were the Austrians, they were not so much interested about all these kind of things. And okay, they released the, and in fact, it didn't work because they could not collect the number of signatures that were demanded. In fact, the campaign stopped even some months before they wanted to finish the campaign, because they didn't want to arrive to the end and assume that they didn't have enough signatures, and so they blocked it even many months before it ends. And in fact, what I also think is that it didn't construct any kind of movements and alliances or any kind of articulation to continue further. So this is my analysis of this of this European citizen initiative. So, but I think that, for example, thinking about this today, more than some years ago, I think to use this tool could be an important way of mobilizing across Europe. Even I have been participating in coalitions at European level that sometimes have difficulties to think how they can have common action. And because the contexts are so different, and because the housing movement is so many times, as the migrant movement, so many times reacting to attacks and to evictions or to deportations or these kind of things. So how can we organize at across different to articulate, to organize, to politicize, to mobilize. But we think we think, based on this experience, the reflection I do is that we should find first a common ground and a shared aim, truly shared aim, which was not existing before, and to understand well the context, the different contexts, to see in this kind of diversity of contexts how we can find a shared aim and goal, and also find a good strategic proposal. I think the proposal has to be interesting and strategical in terms of the continuum. It is good to use the opportunity to inform, to politicize, to organize in the field, in the ground, to build alliances. And I think that this should be used in a way that it is not just targeting the signatures, but trying to develop a movement broadly that can continue in some way. Of course, and find resources and make a good planification of the campaign in advance, because after you just have 1 year to collect the signatures. And if you just start make the planification of the campaign while you already it is a little bit more difficult and you are just running against time. So finally, I think we should prepare ourselves to the worst scenarios, like if we don't collect the number of signatures, if we lose, if we don't achieve any kind of real legislative change. And also think about this in a way that, well, it is very probable that that can happen, but we should have a way out of this. So to know how to continue the struggle I think is important. To think about this in the beginning already. So to not go without, even if we achieve it, is good. If we don't achieve it, the aims we want, maybe we can have other kinds of aims that we can develop. To not lose it all. To not lose it all. That I think it was what happened in that time. And I think if we spend so much energy and resources and time and all that, I think we should use this as an opportunity to build movement in any way and things that can continue this struggle. So finally, I think about the European Citizen Initiative itself, my opinion, even if I said already that I think it can be an interesting tool and a tactic of struggle, I think it is very limited to call on the European Commission to act on something. It's very, very limited. All the effort that we are putting on something that calls for European Commission to act. So and it requires a lot in the housing field, but that maybe is a different story for the border issue. That in the housing field, I still think that national governments are more important in terms of I would prefer to make a legislative initiative at the national level and to put my aim at this scale. But because of the competencies in housing but I think that at European level can also be interesting, but with a different kind of aim. Around borders, I think it is another story, and I think it should. Yes, and I think we should not forget that this European Citizen Initiative was approved in a very contested Treaty of Lisbon. And that it tries to show that this very non-democratic institution that is European Union is democratic in some way. So, but I think nevertheless that it can be a tool to mobilize and to politicize and to develop an articulation and alliances across Europe. And we should think how we can build movement across Europe, which in these days is not being very clear. So how we can build a transnational movement, it is
Okay, thank you guys. You were quite good with time, actually. Didn't made it to 20 minutes. We still have about 50 minutes until, so you'll have to talk more.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
We don't want to, because it's academic events that don't go over time. They are a failure, basically. So, I'm joking. So I would open. I think your interventions. I'll have some questions as well, or some comments. But I would open the questions to the audience to comment. No, it was me saying, that we're leaving the QR code in case, obviously, if there's anyone at home that wants to ask questions, feel free.
Like 90s and not like nothing here, but now I'm just like
another Lisbon.
Yeah. But like now I live here, so it doesn't quite
12?
20,
okay.
Yeah. And you already said broad the European level and competition with the other movements, but staying very locally, can you tell us like a little bit about how the struggle evolved like in the last maybe 10 years?
The housing struggle?
Yeah, it's something like a sense of happen or
yeah.
Now like, it's not terrible, it's a situation which is not like even understandable. So I wanted to ask if you could do this.
Maybe we can more the mobilization, the discrimination. There was some effect of the initiative on the mobilization.
Yeah, I wanted to like the contract of my person was more like no problem. So the category that the housing board does network is like such a process which I think it was born in the US, and
Mhm.
in Italy we had it, and it's a social project to guarantee
I
the
know.
houses that primary support for person in need to develop its own life. And these two struggles are they have much in common or not, it's very that kind of informational internationalization of the problem. It's a movement that already has something well known in the community.
The housing first.
Yeah.
Should I answer now or maybe more?
I was the presentation, the two experience and reflections are very complementary, and I hope that you don't feel like kind of generalize it or this feedback, but I think it's very important to know. Of course, you're completely aware of the things, and I think what is from my perspective, I'm a scholar, so I look at this even very but now I'm not professional scholar. And what is interesting is something that we usually call passionate politics. No? Kind of politics we do because we are passionate. We think that everybody is doing these things because it's bringing something to the how you want to describe a little bit. You mentioned about that you need to have a level of kind of pragmatism about defining the context, about about which context you frame the initiative. And I think this is very important. I think that it's also a description of this level of negotiation with the other countries. What we do for you is important this, for us is important that. So I think it's this level and how much the other discourse part is important, how much the contents are relevant. It was a bit Veronica speech before was about how much the different content, the different framing of a problem make a lot of difference. I don't know if it's a question or a comment.
It feels like a question.
Do we have anyone else in the room? All right, maybe you. Then who wants to start?
You want to answer the first question?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure if I understood if I can. Well, if I understood well your question, because so I'm going to be very, very quick about this. Is that okay? Resuming the situation. Okay, social movement of housing, a new wave, because there was a wave of housing struggles on housing issue during the revolution and the post-revolution in Portugal. After there was a moment of no social movement, almost around, there was cooperative movement, for example, during the 80s. And after in the 90s, I think everything died a little bit in the 90s in terms of maybe some occupations of some groups that were occupying some empty buildings. But in terms of social movement, there was nothing so much expressive. You have the struggle against mass eviction and abolitions, and the beginning of the 2000, and it was in that moment that I started to be active on that. And what happened is that during the housing crisis, the financial crisis, you have a new paradigm that starts to develop in Portugal, promoted by policies and promoted by new movements of global capital. You have the promotion of foreign investment, and you have a lot of policies that help this kind of foreign investment to come to our houses and real estate and tourism too. And that's why we have anti-gentrification around tenants, and not just the mass evictions of settlements. And I think that in this year of 2023, we entered in the new phase of the social movement of housing, which is, in my opinion, we are in a mass movement phase now, that we are putting thousands of people in the streets in different cities of the country. Of course, this was fundamental to have negotiation, because this didn't happen spontaneously. Just because the situation is bad, people don't come spontaneously to the street like that, or sometimes they do, but well, we have already two. And this, connecting to the other question, this gave a lot of, it was very challenging because of all the negotiation it demands with different kinds of groups and political spheres that is willing to mobilize. The housing first, I think, I don't know, I think I see, maybe I'm wrong, I see housing first as a very interesting idea in terms of the program that is more an institutional program that certain organizations pushed for it, and I think that it is a good program, and it is more addressed to homeless people. So homeless people, the way of, you don't need to, sorry about this word, integrate someone that is homeless through different other issues. What you need is the person to be able to enter first in a house, to have a house first, before everything else. Of course, the housing issue is much more complex than this. So this is a good, I think it is a good program. We need much more houses for this program. But the housing issue is much more, it is, you need to work in much more parts of the housing situation. Credit, rental market, and other issues, no? And I think, well, I think, yes, he's very passionate and all that, but I think we need to be very strategical, use the tactics and strategic to build the movement. Is not, we need to achieve victories, some victories, even if we cannot change and make the revolution now. We should achieve victories, because I think they are very important because of different things, because they improve people's lives, but also because you can, and you can also, you know, give more strength to the movement or not. It depends how you politicize these changes and victories. So negotiation is part of this. If there is no negotiation, there is no possibility of achieving some victories with institutions also. Here integrado.
I kind of agree with what you said. And yeah, I think it was a good complementary presentation that you made. Although the difficulties that we were talking about, we also faced. Just to say, I myself, when I am not in like formal or academic situation, I tend to say I think that the European Union is a criminal organization and stuff like that. And it's different tone of voice, but just to say that I don't expect anything at this point from policymakers, from the European Union, from the national states, from the local authorities. I really have no expectations. And like starting a good way, yeah. Still, the amount of work that all these organizations and people are facing when they work in a migration or migration issue is, and then the lack of funding and of human and not just human resources make it kind of hard to actually start in a proper way. There was a movement that tried a similar initiative in 2018. We got in contact with them to get some insights. Rationally, we shouldn't even think about it, and that's why to spend all this energy just to point a question to the European Commission, and at the end, each 1 million signatures, they could answer, yeah, well, the Article 4 is there, we've done the part already. So that was the point. But the point was just exactly that. We're not expecting anything. We will not spend a single euro on this thing. I think it's kind of criminal the fact that this tool exists since 2016, and I don't remember exactly when, a couple of months ago, that around the 3% of the European population knows about it. So it was not for the result, it was not for the outcome. It's just that there is one democratic tool we have as citizens, so it's no 100,000 signatures, which is 10% of what's needed. I, as a personal experience, about passion politics, for example, it's passion, I myself would call it also even selfish politics. I don't know. It's because if I had to be rational on what I do on a daily basis, or when I go in Bosnia and Serbia, for what I've seen, and so on, we should just stay home and not really die. Yeah, exactly. The point is that I cannot stand it, so I do it also for myself. When we try to give the first welcome, such a global issue is migration flows. Still, I need to be there on a daily basis. I need to spend some of my time doing these kind of things. Otherwise, I feel my life is not worth it. And that applies just the same with the European initiative. It's not for the outcome. It's on the daily basis for it's professional politics. It's for like politics intended like in the how I would like for myself before than for the others. And then this is when I think on a daily basis, then when I think on a very long term, that I think about, oh, I will not need to be here anymore. I think I need to put this stone, this grain of sand of this initiative, and let even just 10 people know about it. Because what I envision is like for this kind of tool, if it was actually advertised, if 50% of the 500 million Europeans that we are knew about it, it would be so strange to have initially just like that massive. And it would not be so strange to collect 30 million signatures on one if it was ahead. And even though it's it would be harder to kind of say, oh, never mind, if the numbers were different. The point, the hard part is like the issue. Doing that is part of the game. Yeah.
All right. Thank you both. Francesca, and then Veronica and Federica.
Yeah, it's on the line of the comments of both actually. And I was wondering, I was thinking about the restaurant topic. And I'm going to start with a very personal and practical example. So a few months ago, we were starting preparing the workshop. The very limited amount of people that reacted to me. And I have to say that the people that reacted the most were not social movement activists or people that were politically active. So my question is, like, how does it work? I mean, sometimes I have the feeling, talking with friends that are activists, for example, you talk about this kind of initiative, and like kind of I don't know how to say it, but consider it useless because it's too much institutional, because you're using a European tool to fight. My mom that never went to the demonstration in her life contacted her as 30 friends a day all the time. So I was wondering, like, which is the audience that at the end actually reacted, apart from the fact that you create networks among social movements, but then who's going to be the people that actually sign?
Yes, it's a very good.
Yeah. Just a curiosity question for Francesca. Can you maybe say a bit more on the disagreements that existed in that time lapse of 2 years when you were trying to write collectively the citizens initiatives? So what were the main issues that the group disagreed about?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. From both your stories and how this is a tool that can be useful or not, we can use, of course, we can know that in advance. At the same time, I think it's very important an aspect that I think all of you really highlighted, and it's that whatever the outcome, you can still have some important secondary effects engaging in this kind of initiative, and that's why I would stress how important it is. In particular, I think because you were saying it's widely unknown, even within activists, within engaged people. So I think it's first of all, we don't know how it works. We don't know, or we know very loosely what are the best ways to use it, the best practices, the most effective, the most successful ways. We don't
it's not the best one because it's very much on the competence. My rating might be 1, but at the same time, I think, you know, like it's an extremely polarized topic. It's a topic that in most cases, at least it's perceived by European citizens as being focused on someone else, like not affecting our lives as, you know, white people in Europe, but it's affecting somebody else. So maybe, I don't know, this can have an impact on the motivation of people to engage in these in the ECI. I think that there are some studies also that are starting to compare these different ECI initiatives. For example, there is that was good on how it worked, for example, the rights to work. We are learning, and when I say we, I think we are learning as scholars, but we are learning again as people who are actually using these things. Because if we know how they work and how people engage with them, then we can also plan our campaigns. And we know that we have like 1, 2 models we can use besides all the others, potentials or discontentials we have. So I think it's important to keep testing it. In that sense, I think it's like both these campaigns, even if the one announced it well, we don't know this one how it will go, but yes, they're very, very important. And I also think, and this is the question part of the comment. I think that one of the aspects we can learn is also what kind of lives we can count on in this, using the ECI. Yes, we can do that in society, probably understanding what the target can be, like also, but I think also institutionally. So if we can address the complexity, I think also what we were discussing earlier today with the Guya. So also, I think like one actor that we need very interesting, the European Parliament, right? Because I think, okay, this is an instrument that is designed for this mission, whatever, then this European Parliament, which on the one hand is like the friends of human rights and whatever, this is, well, maybe it's more than the Council or the Commission, but at the same time, I would really, I don't know, contest this very positive vision of the EP, but at the same time can be an ally, and maybe not, maybe it needs to be forced somehow to take action and to support this kind of initiative. I don't know, but this is something that maybe for thoughts. So yeah, that's I don't know what the opinion is. Very complicated. What do you get my
Perfect.
I would have a question as well, but I'll leave it for later. You already have. No, go for it.
Maybe this is helping us to reach.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying.
I don't know where to start from. Okay. Well, in terms of resonance, yeah, we face the same situation. I can just make a comment and get different answers. Who's the public? Public is it really depends on how much time I talk to. So just we got from the most institutional partners, like for example, Recosol, the Rete dei Comuni Solidali, it's a network of solidal township municipalities. Municipalities, so it's a big network, it's important, and they were like, wow, this is an important initiative. Of course, none of these municipalities are far right, let's say. So it depends. And then just to make some institutional examples, we also got to talk to parties, political parties, for example, but we did it in a specific way. So we were the first 2 parties that came to us, which were the Communists and the Radical Party. Yes. And we said, okay, thanks. Yes, this is the European citizenship, so we will not say no to anybody. Everybody can join, just because it's divisive. If you can ask all the parties, since you work together in the parliament, the Italian parliament, just to make an example, ask everybody. Italy at least appear at the same time on the list. will not, so they will not say, hey, they are there, we will not get inside, and just to make an example. And the least institutional, let's say, network, informal group that we managed to get involved is Abolish Frontex, which is full of anarchists and kind of people that say, yeah, it's institutional, it's full of the European Union, it's nonsense to use it, and so on. And it really depends on the narration you make of this initiative, because yes, it's a tool that was made by the European Union, and that, just to say, the way I explained it to the assembly of Abolish Frontex was basically, yes, we all know that the European Union is a criminal organization, but this criminal organization made a mistake, because they made a democratic tool and nobody knows about harm or give some kind of difficulties because they will have to. And it was not a very strong, a very strong point, but it was not. So we managed to get also bad anarchists dressed in black that usually throw molotovs and they went on stage to participate in the law and to spread it. So when we talk about the public, it's really, I don't know. I find it natural that when it comes to activists and volunteers, they are kind of saying, no, please not that. Not this. I'm just doing so many things already. I'm burned out. I don't have the time. So I feel them when they go like that. Also, I would say I kind of remind me if you want. Give it a try. But I mean, this is just personal saying action. I don't know. Talking about the disagreements that we found in these 2 years, yeah, Francesca was stating some of those. But mainly it was that the hardest point, if I step and say this initiative when it was already going, Paola, initially.
It was not 2 years.
No, it was a little less.
2 years for we had to look for contacts in all over Europe because in the committee you need to have at least 7 countries. Study that to reach the minimum level, common minimum level. So that nobody could disagree. So that's all. And that could cover all the different situations, like Libya or Turkey or inside and outside of the countries.
Then, I mean, there was some litigation, I don't know if it's not the right word, but like we had 2, 3 different lawyers were inside the group, and they were kind of they were kind of discussing on the forum which the text of the initiative was stated, but I wouldn't talk about that. The main, like the most critique. We think that she made the half. And then what they say was basically, don't you think that if this initiative fails, then you are basically showing that nobody cares about the migrants' rights, fundamental rights in the European Union? The point is no, because it's real that 3% of the population knows about this initiative, this tool, and it's also kind of normal that it's hard to reach the point, and the fact that you can fail is not a reason not to try. We in Italy we say chi non risica non rosica. Sorry, I cannot translate this. So I mean, it wasn't really a matter of disagreement. It's more the problem of the organization that's first get involved. everything that happens and then it has to be done pragmatically takes organization and people and energy. So when they make a commitment, they end up not having that strength, not being able to follow up on what they actually started saying. So we had a lot of organization that were involved, followed some meetings, started doing something, and then left. So even if we took 2 years in like preparing the initiative, in the end it was short. Now it's been 4 months and we collected some like between paper and digital signatures, maybe 15,000. That's not enough. I can say it's public. So yes, it's not about like the disagreement. Different than the housing, for example, and that's it. So when you get to alleys, you never know what alleys you can find. And my personal point of view, MIPs are not the best alleys you can find. Actually, one of the things that you win when you manage to collect 1 million signatures is to present your initiative in front of the European Parliament. I don't know. I met some MIPs at the Bosnian-Croatian border, which is basically nothing. I mean, what I saw, but I mean, it's personal experience, is I found, like, I mean, the intentions were good, but in the end, on the field that were trying to give them some insight on what was the actual situation. And we're like, yes, we did this, yes, we did that, yes, we want this, yes, we want that. But I didn't find my personal experience the best allies there. But in the end, as I said, all possible levels of action are important, and all possible allies are important. Yeah, if they try their best. Thanks. For the long. I'm sorry.
We have 50 minutes.
Yeah, getting there.
I think that we should not choose the way we struggle, if it is more institutional or contentious or whatever, based on principle or aesthetic taste or ideology. I think we should choose the ways that we promote the struggle in having aims and a strategy, and you want to arrive to certain things. And I think that all the tactics are acceptable. Really, all the tactics are acceptable. Maybe less 1 or 2. Okay. But it's very broad, the spectrum, in my opinion. And but it should enter in a strategy of building something or changing, not just because it is an aesthetic manifestation of myself. I think that is not a very. And another thing is that I am not searching. I think we should not. Right in my very little group, but nothing happens. No, I think that we need to, maybe deal with a lot of different people and to mix and to, and to talk and to be able to interact with people and to construct something that is broad. And if it is broad, to arrive to your mother, maybe you are not to being just breaking the windows, because maybe it's not a favorite way of being struggling or something, no?
If you knew my mother, maybe.
So, I think that these are really problems that we are facing today in our. I think you mentioned this. I face.
movements are very divided around these kind of issues that for me are not strategical or tactical or political, are very much based on, you know, yes, I think it is very much the individuality that arrives to the, is very much, I don't know, I think this is not good for the social movements, and I think it's very much the influence of neoliberalism in social movements in some certain way, I think. Well, but I understand that there is, you know, we are facing, you know, there is a lot of disappointment about a lot of things. So maybe we so I think people are looking for new ways, and we are in this moment. So let's see what we can do with it. I also think that I agree with all the comments that you said, you know, and for me it was important, these initiatives that I participated in, even if to reflect around that, and there are certain things that we can understand better doing, and you know, through the practice and studying and reflecting on it, we can do it better. I cannot have a lot of answers yet about this. In fact, I'm thinking about now starting a new. This is secret, okay? I'm starting.
Being recorded.
Okay. I'm starting.
Censor it.
I'm thinking about this, but you know, just imagining how it is going to be. There is a lot of complexity, and you need to think really about different kinds of allies, institutional allies too. But this includes, you know, it deals with politics. It's not just complexity; it's the politics and different kind of things. So, well, we have to do and to fail or to make mistakes, and you know, and try. Let's see.
Okay, thank you. Question. I was just commenting with Rita. I'm part of a group here that is also trying to implement and collect signatures for to do a local referendum. And many of the discussions that we have around that, you know, it's just a self-reflection. So that I was thinking about, you know, many of the debates and reflections that we do on it, and the conclusion that we got, and also there are some lawyers, academic scholars that say, well, you know, there's this figure in the legislation, but it's actually just, you know, it's just there, but it's not meant to be used because there's so many roadblocks, you know, like you have to collect, you can't collect the signatures online, you have to collect on paper. So there's a lot of work involved, and it has to go through a lot of institutions until it's approved. So, you know, I was thinking, with all the requirements that this initiative has, and sorry for the pessimistic question, you know, and I think it's laudable that, you know, it has, you know, it helps to build movement, and I think that's great. But I was thinking, you know, when the legislator built this tool, was it meant to be used, or was it just to give this idea of democracy in European citizens? I mean, it's probably a very straight answer, but I thought it would be
Shall we answer at the same time? Yes, it's okay.
I was.
the initiative do, but when I talk with the anarchists or people that are actual activists that are like hate states and burn borders and stuff like that, I can express myself the way I think, and it's yeah, and then it's a tool that was made and suddenly realized either they knew it in advance, let's just do it and defeat them, or they say, oh, we made this tool, let's not tell anyone.
Yeah.
And that's when it comes, that's when it becomes maybe interesting also for state anarchist organization. At some point, if you want to call yourself democratic, at least this much. And then that's kind of the, how do you say, the bridge in which you can enter and try to also do something. So yeah, the straightforward answer is like probably sometimes tools are made that they were not meant to be used, and that's when it comes to us to take them and say, hey, look at this, what I found, you should use this.
Yeah.
I found the shovel. That's
it. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very quick. I think that the European Union is a very clever project that, in fact, what it means is that it's designed to be above democracy and participation. Structure that it's not achievable through, organization and participation. So I think it's a clever project that took from us a lot of big area of democracy, in my opinion. So I think that is this IECN project, in my opinion, European Union is that. This is the first. So this European Citizens Initiative is not binding. What it says is a call for the European Commission to act on something. So of course, it has the filter of the European Commission. Yeah, so there is this. But I think we should use it to mobilize and to use it in different ways, to struggle, to pressure in different ways. That is not my thing. But we see that sometimes, there are referendums that win in certain places. Like, for example, in Berlin, there was a very interesting referendum that won, and they didn't apply it.
Yeah.
They didn't. The institutions didn't respect the vote of people in terms of the nationalization of big landlords with more than 3,000 housing units. So, and they didn't apply it. The expropriation of these. When we enter in these kind of projects, we need to be prepared for the defeats and to know what to do with the defeat. I think that is something that we never think about, and we should, because it is the most probably. Yeah, but you can use the process in good ways, and you can continue in a certain way what you have started. So I think we should also think about that possibility and use it in some way.
Yeah, also in Italy it happened.
There are a lot of referendums that were not.
Yeah, we tried to legalize drugs in Italy and we managed to collect all the signatures that we needed for the referendum, but they say no, you cannot.
Yeah, so they can block it in the.
with this, and good luck with at least to build a movement.
Thanks.
At a European level. If we don't have any other questions or comments, thank you again, and I would applaud.
Vivienne.
Maybe just hope to see you again in December for the next seminar. Online, and we are thinking continue. It was very interesting to me, and it was
Thank you also at home for the two resistance.
And now, yeah. Best.
Right.